Welcome to Grandad's Story Time. Please like and subscribe. I post new content every day. Paddington at the Tower by Michael Bond and Fred Banbury. Soon after Paddington went to live at number 32 Windsor Gardens, Mr. and Mrs. Brown gave him a basket on wheels. The Browns' house was near the Portobello Road, where there was a large market, and every morning Paddington went there to do his shopping. After calling at the baker's, where he had to stand in order for buns, he then went on to see his friend, Mr. Gruber, who kept an antique shop. Paddington liked Mr. Gruber's shop. It was so full, it was like an Aladdin's cave. Every day Mr. Gruber made some cocoa, and they had a snack together. One morning, however, Paddington had a big surprise. When he reached the shop, he found Mr. Gruber busy putting up his shutters. "It's Easter Monday, Mr. Brown," said Mr. Gruber, "and as it's such a nice day, I thought we would take you and Jonathan and Judy on a mystery outing." Paddington was very excited. He hurried back home to tell the others, and then he began making some marmalade sandwiches. He soon had so many he could hardly close the lid on his suitcase. Later that morning they set off. Mr. Gruber found them the right seat at the front of the bus so that he could point out the interesting sights on the way. They had been travelling quite a while when Jonathan and Judy suddenly let out a cry. "I know where we're going," said Judy as they turned a corner. "It's the Tower of London," exclaimed Jonathan. Paddington had never been to the Tower of London before, and he was most impressed. It was much, much bigger than had been pictured. As they reached the entrance, a man in a strange uniform stepped forward to take their tickets. "That's one of the beef-eaters," whispered Jonathan. "They look after the tower." "They're really yeoman warders," explained Judy, "but they're called beef-eaters because in the old days they used to taste all the royal food to make sure it was safe to eat." Paddington raised his hat politely and then opened his suitcase. "Would you like one of my marmalade sandwiches?" he asked. "I expect you will make a nice change from beef." "A marmalade sandwich?" spluttered the beef-eater. He held the object up between his thumb and forefinger and stared at it as if he could hardly believe his eyes. When he looked down again, Paddington was gone. After taking a look at the expression on the man's face, Paddington had picked up his suitcase and hurried off after the others. Several sandwiches dropped out on the way, but by then he was much too upset to notice. Mr. Gruber hastily led them through an arch. When they were safely around the corner, he stopped beside a large cage. "This is where they keep the ravens, Mr. Brown," he said. "There's always had ravens here, and it's said if they ever fly away, then the tower will fall down." Paddington peered at the empty cage. "Perhaps we'd better go soon, Mr. Gruber," he said anxiously. Mr. Gruber laughed. "I don't think there's any fear of it happening just yet, Mr. Brown," he said. "The tower looks very solid to me." He pointed towards a large black bird standing watching them. "Besides, there is at least one raven keeping an eye on things." "He looks as if he's got an eye on Paddington," said Judy. Next Mr. Gruber took them to a room deep under the ground. "This is where the crown jewels are kept," whispered Judy. "They are made of gold and they are very valuable. That's why they're kept behind glass." Mr. Gruber showed them St. Edward's crown, the orb and sceptre, and the ampulla and spoon of the holy oil. "They were all used by the Queen at her coronation," he explained. "The crown has more than 400 precious stones and it weighs nearly 5 pounds. Paddington's eyes grew larger and larger. He could quite see why no one wanted the tower to fall down. When they came out of the jewel house, Paddington noticed a strange thing. There were now 2 ravens watching him. A moment later, 2 more arrived, and all 4 stared at him as he went past. Paddington gave them a hard stare back. but for once it didn't seem to have any effect. "Perhaps we'd better have a picnic outside by the river," said Judy, when she saw the worried look on Paddington's face. "They won't follow you out there." But the ravens did follow Paddington, and by the time they'd reached the gate there were so many he'd nearly lost count. "And where do you think you're going with our ravens, young fellow my bear?" asked the beefeater in charge. "He's not going anywhere with them," said Jonathan and Judy. "They're going with him." "It makes no difference," said the man sternly. "I'm not letting you leave here and risk having the place fall down. That bear will have to stay in the tower until we've decided what's best." "Oh, crikey," groaned Jonathan. "Fancy Paddington being sent to the tower." Suddenly Mr. Gruber had an idea. "You know what?" he said excitedly. "I don't think it's Mr. Brown they're after. I think it's his sandwiches." Paddington gazed at Mr. Gruber in astonishment. "My sandwiches?" he exclaimed hotly. But Mr. Gruber was right. Sure enough, as soon as Paddington opened his suitcase, all the ravens gathered round and began pecking at the contents. "All the years I've been here," said the beefeater, "and I never knew ravens like marmalade." He looked at Paddington with new respect. "Perhaps you should give me your address, sir. Then if any of our birds ever get lost, we can send for you. We may even be able to find you a special jar of marmalade to keep with you, and in case it's needed in a hurry." "Trust Paddington to get sent to the tower and then end up with a jar of marmalade," exclaimed Judy. Paddington looked at it happily. "If I'm to be a marmalade eater," he announced, "perhaps I'd better test it now, just to make sure." The end. Thank you for watching. If you like this content, please give me a big thumbs up. Please subscribe, it's free, to support us and allow us to create more great content.